What you're about to see is going to infuriate a lot of you, and it is happening more and more in America. It is something called jury nullification, or tipping the scales of justice. It happens when juries say, in effect, forget the evidence, let's acquit, let's nullify the law, let defendants go free, even if they're guilty. Back in the days when slavery was legal, white juries frequently nullified the law and acquitted white defendants who had helped slaves escape. Well, now a black law professor is urging black juries to use nullification in their fight for racial justice. The professor is Paul Butler. He's a graduate of Harvard Law School who teaches now at George Washington University Law School. And he wrote about all this recently in the prestigious Yale Law Journal. A man, black, caught selling crack. Okay?
Yes.
Are you suggesting that the jury should nullify?
Yes, that jury ought to acquit him for reasons of black self-help and to make a political point.
Professor Butler says that black jurors should let the guilty black defendant go free. Yes, go free on most drug charges, possession and sales, on perjury, even burglary, as long as nobody gets hurt. He calls these felonies non-violent, largely victimless crimes. If you let a guilty defendant off, isn't that the same as really taking the law into your own hands?
It absolutely is the same as taking the law in your own hands. And
if you think that sounds inflammatory, even radical, you might be surprised to learn that Paul Butler used to work for the Justice Department as a special assistant U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. You used to be a prosecutor.
I sure did. I was a very good prosecutor, and I was responsible for a lot of black people going to prison. I began to feel like a cog in this machine, and I thought that's wrong. Even if some of those people belong in prison, I didn't go to law school to send my people to prison.
Butler says jurors have an obligation to reverse that trend by taking race into account in their deliberations. A political and moral, yes, moral obligation.
We have a country now where 1 out of 3 young black men is under criminal justice supervision. I guarantee you we would be working on alternatives to prison if that were true of the white population.
There is no question that race often affects the outcome of trials. Look at the beating of Rodney King. A mostly white jury watched this videotape and then acquitted the white police officers. Most experts say the jury nullified the law.
Oh, look at that. Terrible.
And in the near-fatal beating of white truck driver Reginald Denny, the experts say the tables were turned. Black defendants were acquitted of attempted murder by a largely black jury. Professor Butler says that there are so many blacks now in American prisons that black American jurors should acquit some guilty black defendants.
I think that's very bad advice. It's bad advice first because he's making an appeal to racial sentiment.
Professor Randall Kennedy was Paul Butler's teacher at the Harvard Law School.
The question is, do we live in a society right now that is so racially oppressive that jurors should engage in subversion of the legal system? The answer to me is no.
Butler was a good student, says Kennedy, but he disagrees with Butler's advice to black jurors.
The fact of the matter is, we're all Americans. We all have an interest in an effective social legal order, and subverting that through jury nullification without just cause is a bad idea.
Professor Butler, let me read you what you have written. My goal, you write, is the subversion of American criminal justice, at least as it now exists.
When the only function of the criminal law is to say, you're wrong, you're bad, and even though you didn't hurt anybody, you're immoral, then we need to subvert that system. It's unjust because, again, it's punishing you for being poor and for being black.
Joseph DeGeneva was formerly the top government prosecutor in the same office where Butler used to work. DeGeneva was the U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C.
The point is that you either have law or you don't. It is anarchy to suggest that a jury should ignore that law and acquit someone because they think it's, quote, fundamentally unfair.
It is the moral responsibility of black jurors, he says, to emancipate some guilty black outlaws.
It may be a recognition of the reality of the way some jurors think. But it is, in my opinion, bad public policy, bad law, and kind of morally reprehensible to invite people, as a matter of public policy, to ignore the law and acquit people merely because they are who they are.
Should a black killer get off?
Absolutely not.
Should a man with a gun outside a store, black, should he get off?
The jury has to decide in that case whether that person was going to victimize somebody.
If a black man is arrested, who's better qualified to say what the punishment should be? Society as a whole or black society?
Well, that's an easy question. Black society. White society has proven time in and time out that they don't have black interests at heart.
So Irish defendants should be judged by Irish juries and Jewish defendants by Jewish juries.
These ethnic groups haven't had the same hatred visited upon them as African Americans.
Who then polices the police? You police the police.
The most racially divisive trial in recent times, of course, was the O.J. Simpson case, in which defense attorney Johnny Cochran seemed to make an outright appeal to black jurors for nullification.
You're the ones who send the message. Nobody else is going to do it in this society. They don't have the courage.
Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
Professor Butler disagrees with those who say the jury's verdict was nullification. He believes that Simpson walked because the prosecution's case was weak.
There was reasonable doubt about Mark Furman. There was reasonable doubt about the integrity of the government's evidence. That was not jury nullification.
Marion Barry,
Yes.
mayor of Washington, D.C., caught on tape smoking crack, right?
Yes.
Goes to trial. He's let off.
Yes. Well, first of all, he didn't just happen to be caught on tape. The white law enforcement officers set him up. And clearly, some of the jurors must have agreed with me, too, because they did not convict him of even the count where he smoked crack cocaine on videotape.
So that's jury nullification.
Yes, the jurors said, we're not going to use our power to endorse this racist prosecution.
It's pretty hard to sell to me.
And the beauty of jury nullification is that we don't have to sell it to you. It doesn't matter if a white person understands or agrees with it. It's power that we have, whether you or any other white person likes it or not.
But Harvard law professor Randall Kennedy takes issue with that.
If it's okay for black jurors to show more solicitude for black defendants, then other people, your listeners, the people watching, are going to get the message, well, if it's okay for black jurors, why isn't it okay for white jurors to show more solicitude to white defendants?
Historically, according to Joe DeGeneva, that's exactly what white jurors have often done in racially charged cases.
White jurors refusing to convict Southern policemen of police brutality cases. White jurors refusing to convict white people accused of murder where the victims were blacks. We have a long history of the American people deciding on their own that notwithstanding what the law is, they're simply not going to convict someone of a crime.
I see black kids at this moment looking in and saying, hey, there's Professor Butler, and he's saying it's okay for me to sell drugs for $1,000 a week. Forget about those dead-end jobs at McDonald's. And the professor says, that's okay.
If he thinks that, he's only read half of my article, because I don't think it's okay.
If jurors acquit guilty defendants, Butler says, those jurors should also do volunteer work in their communities to improve conditions there.
You got to be involved in the uplift of your community through mentoring programs, through tutoring, through drug counseling. We're going to deal with the problem inside the community.
But the community has not been dealing with the problem.
Sure, the community has been dealing with the problem, but we haven't been dealing with it to the extent that we should have.
What do you think a white family looking in at this moment in their living room are saying about you and your idea?
Well, if it's a white ethnic family, say an Italian family or a Jewish family, I think they're thinking that's exactly the way that our community used to deal with problems. We dealt with problems inside the family, inside our ethnic group, because we didn't trust the larger society. So I think there are a lot of white Americans who will agree with me.